say the game is getting old. Monday morning and your coffee's cold. Life is not what you want it to be.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to A New Direction. I'm Jay Izso, your host, and we really have a powerful show today. Every show that I do is a great show, but some shows are just more powerful, I believe, than others. And I think today's show is without exception. We are going to do something a little bit unique and different. And that is, the name of this program is called A New Direction with Jay Izso. That's the name of the program. And the reason why we call it A New Direction is because we try to help people find a new direction in their life, their business, or their career. And so I am one who is never afraid to do something that might be a little edgy. And because I don't think there should be subject matter that we should just avoid because we don't like to hear about it or we don't want to talk about it. And I want to tell you that today we're going to talk about depression and dealing with depression. And what's really cool is I have this really awesome guest by the name of Chris Jones, who wrote these two science fiction books. One's called Lost in Time, and the other is Reset the Future and its Reversion. And we're going to be talking with him today because he fights his own battle of depression, and he used writing these books, these two books that I'm showing you right now. He used these books and more because this is a series of books that he's writing, these science fiction books, available on Amazon. He's using these and more in order to help him with his issues of depression, which he's going to talk about. But also, when this was pitched to me, right, when his publicist pitched this to me, his publicist said, look, he's a guy who deals with depression and he really wants to help people out with this. And I thought, that's the type of person that I want on the show, is somebody that is going to be authentic and transparent and honest with what he's going through, and at the same time can help others overcome what they're dealing with, and with depression in particular. So that's why I really feel like this is a powerful show today. And so if you have folks, and listen, we all deal with depression on some level. If you live long enough, you're going to be depressed about something, whether it's situational depression, whether, because the situations come up. I mean, loss of a loved one could cause depression, certainly. But maybe, some people go through the lifetime, in and out of depression. Some people have major depression. We're going to talk about all those things, and we're going to talk with Chris here in a second. Before I do, but let's do what I do every week, and let's check in with you with your four areas of your life, right? I believe that we are four-part people. We are physical people, mental people, emotional people, and spiritual people. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 being amazing, physically, where are you at right now? So, and I'm going to ask you, I want you to think about it. How are you doing? It's New Year's resolution time, right? Which I don't really believe in, but that's okay. That's another story. But how are you doing physically? Where are you at? Are you exercising regularly? Are you eating right? If you're on some sort of things to help, like say cholesterol, are you doing everything that you're supposed to be doing for that? Right. And whatever your number is, I don't care what your number is. I don't care if it's a 3, 4, 5, 6. The whole goal is, how do you get to the next number? So if you're a 4, how do you get to a 5? If you're 5, how do you get to a 6? What do you need to change right now? I don't want you to wait and say, well, this is what I'm going to do tomorrow. No, what I want you to do is I want you to think right now, what do you need to change in order to move that number up physically? All right. And then do it. Don't wait. Do it. Got it? Okay, so you got the first number. That's a physical number. All right, let's talk about mentally. And mentally, what I'm talking about here on that scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 being great, mentally, what I'm talking about is, what are you doing to exercise your mind? Right? What are you reading? What are you putting inside your mind that you're able to grow and expand your mind? Because you got to understand that your brain is right and left for a reason, right? The right side of your brain is the creative side. The left side of your brain is the more logical side. So we need to be doing things to exercise both halves of our brain, right? So what are you reading? What are you intaking to exercise your brain? All right. And what is that on that scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 being awesome? Where are you at with that mentally? Okay. Got that number? So you got two numbers. You got physical and mental. Third one, emotionally. Where are you at emotionally on that scale of 1 to 10, 1 being miserable, 10 being great? And emotionally, what I'm talking about is I'm talking about your emotional quotient, your emotional IQ. That's when I'm talking about there is how well are you able to control your emotions, right? And by the way, controlling your emotions is an intentional thing, okay? And you can be better at controlling your emotions. You do not have to respond the same way emotionally just because you feel that way. You don't have to do something on the basis of what you feel. You can actually intentionally say, I may feel this way, but I don't have to respond this way emotionally. I can overcome it. Not saying it's easy, right? But the more you practice how to overcome your emotions and dealing with your emotions, the better you get with them. And the other part of emotions are also how well are you able to relate to other people's emotions? Okay, that's all part of that number of the scale of 1 to 10. So if you're 5, you feel like you're doing kind of average with your emotions, right? But how are you going to get to a 6 in controlling your emotions and emoting better with others, right? Thanks, Chris, for watching and listening. So how are you doing with that? Okay, so it's 3 numbers so far. Now let's go to the 4th side, and that is the spiritual side of you. And I know that I get so many of you who say to me, "Well, Jay, I'm not a spiritual person. I don't believe in God." Okay, but trust me when I say to you that there is a spiritual side to all of us. There is a side to you that believes in things that you cannot see, that you have faith in somewhere, that even though you can't see them, you still do them. All right, even if you don't believe in God, I promise you there is something that you do that walks by faith on some level. I promise you do that. And if it is God, how is that relationship going? But some people it's nature, some people it's karma, some people it's something else. Okay? But the point is, how are you doing where you're centered spiritually, where you're finding a sense of peace, a sense of joy, a sense of calmness? I didn't say happiness, I said joy. It's 2 different things. All right? And then on that scale of 1 to 10. All right, so you got 4 numbers. You got the physical number, the mental number, the emotional number, the spiritual number. And you think of them as 4 legs of a table, okay? So if they're uneven, right, it's harder to eat off a table that's uneven, right? If it's slanted one way or another. So balanced table is important, but also having the table at the right height. Because if you're in a normal chair, say a 9 or 10 is at the right table level, okay? Then you having the spiritual, the physical, the mental, emotional, and having that all even and at the right level is where you're at your best. And that's what the whole idea of the show is. A New Direction is to help people be at their best in whatever it is, whether it's their life or their business or their career or whatever. And that's the whole point of it. And man, we've got so many listeners and that are joining us here on Facebook Live. Thank you all so much for joining us. I know Chris is going to be so excited. So let me tell you about our next guest, Chris Jones, because Chris Jones is, well, I'm gonna tell you something. He's a guy who is authentic. He is real. He's currently living in Dallas, Texas. He actually comes from my home state where I'm talking to you right now, which is North Carolina. He dreamed up the series of books called Reversion. These are the 2 books that he's got out so far, and it's a series. And it evolved from an originalized story idea, and it came from a novel, and he started evolving it, and then it became this unique blend of storytelling, dialogue mixed with science fiction, and then intrigue and romance, and then Chris is also a comedian, so he's a funny guy as well. But the one thing that Chris has struggled with for really his whole life has been depression and a little bit of bipolar, and so today we're going to talk to him about that. So first of all, let me welcome to the show, everybody. Please welcome Chris Jones. Chris, welcome to A New Direction.
Thank you for having me.
So by the way, Chris is brought to you today by, and I always feel like I want to say like it's a Sesame Street thing, he's brought to you by the number 3, but he's not. Actually, Chris is brought to you by Inline Business and Brokers and Advisors. They have literally helped thousands of clients in the sale and purchase of their businesses. When it's time to sell your business, contact the professionals at Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. You can learn more online at Inline.com. That's www.enlign.com. Tell Jeff Snell that you heard, and his associates that you heard us talk about him on A New Direction with Jay Izso. Chris, so let's talk about depression. I know that's not a real popular thing, but we all deal with it, right? On some level?
On some level, everybody does. I think most people live with normal things. They don't recognize that they're happy or sad or whatever. But at the times when it's the worst is when they will know it's depression. And usually most people get over it and move on with their lives. But there's other people that they deal with it on a daily basis. So,
do you think it's hard? I mean, was it hard for you to come to grips with the idea that you suffered or were suffering from depression? And was that a difficult for you?
It wasn't really hard to get a grip on that per se. The hard part was actually getting myself in to get treatment with doctors and trying to learn how to deal with the different meds that they want me to try. They've never really found one that works perfectly on me, so we spend a lot of time trying to get the right cocktail of medicines that actually will work. And at the same time, I'm trying to do therapy to learn how to deal with my emotions a little more directly without medication. So that's the part that I really got to learn home.
Yeah. How did you, I mean, what was it? Did you wake up one morning and just go, dude, you're depressed? I mean, you just...
Actually, no, it was never really something that I called depression until many years later after I was diagnosed. I always kind of knew something was off, but calling it depression was just not one of the things I called it. It's just something that was off from as far back as I can remember. And at times it's better, other times it's not. I can keep myself distracted. I can keep myself from really noticing it. So that's part of where the books came from.
Yeah, well, and I want to talk about these books because the books Reversion, Reset the Future, and Reversion, Lost in Time, that Chris has wrote. It's part of this science fiction series that he's wrote, which has been hi Sandy, candidate from Northern California. Thanks for dropping in. So these books were a help to you in fighting your depression. Writing these books. Why was writing a book? Why was writing books such a help to you in terms of overcoming depression?
Well, first let me correct that, because it's not exactly the writing of the book that helped to fight the depression. Eventually, when I did start writing the book, I was writing it from the stories that I had developed over years, but it was actually the living in that world of trying to come up with new ways to think and stories in there, and from the start to beginning or to the end. And that part of it was the part that actually kept me from feeling so depressed. Eventually, when I turned about 46 or 47, I decided, I've got a lot of these stories here that I've been developing over the years. Why don't I go ahead and see if I can write it? And that gave me some distraction as well. So it wasn't really the books writing themselves that got me out of it. It was the fantasy side of it and getting that story out that got me from feeling a little less depressed. So
what you're doing here is you're living in a fantasy. You've got this idea in your head, this fantasy world, and you're living in this world that's distracting you from from your depression, right?
Correct.
You're just so I mean, I've read some things where you've talked about on Goodreads. By the way, if you're a Goodreads reader, these books are on Goodreads, and you can actually review them, and I highly recommend that you do. The stories are just fascinatingly intriguing. If you're into science fiction and time travel and a little romance and a little intrigue and a little espionage, I think you'll enjoy both of these books, because these books certainly lend itself to that. And Chris, they're very well written, and Chris has done a great job. Right from the introduction, they kind of go, okay, I'm going to have to go through that. So there's many symptoms that we see in depression, right? Like, for instance, it could be a loss of interest in activities that we normally take pleasure in. It could be gaining weight, or sometimes it can be even weight loss. Trouble sleeping or feeling sleepy during the day. Sometimes people are restless and agitated, or they're sluggish and they slow down physically or mentally. Sometimes they're just tired and have no energy. Sometimes they feel worthless or guilty. Sometimes they can't concentrate, have a hard time making decisions. Sometimes, it can get even worse from there. What were some of your symptoms and maybe you still experience them? What were some of them for you?
It varied over the years. When I was much younger, it actually was one of those things where I was just doing my best to stay away from the world, defocus myself. I was active, but I was active to my own self, and not really dealing with other people for the most part. And I guess to some degree I was having a lot more tiredness than should be expected. As I grew up, I think I got to a point where I was starting to gain weight, and that probably continued through the years. I'm actually at a point now where I'm starting to lose a little weight, but not where I want to be yet.
Sure.
And I think still, to some degree, I have a tendency to oversleep when I don't really need to.
Mm-hmm. So okay, I'm going to share something with the folks, and I know this. It's not printed necessarily on your bio anywhere, but the truth of the matter is, you've also done comedy, right?
Well, when I say done comedy, I've actually written jokes and all. I haven't done the
okay. You haven't done the stand-up piece.
Comedy stand-up.
Right, but you write comic material. I mean, I've gone to your Facebook page, and there's a lot of funny stuff on your. I mean, you pull a lot of funny stuff on your Facebook feed. So I mean,
that's hard. That's part of my therapy, really, because the more you laugh, believe it or not, the more you can laugh at yourself, especially, the easier it is to deal with depression.
Well, no, of course, we release dopamine, which is a drug that we have in the brain that helps us feel happy, and then endorphins that also help us feel happy. So whenever we're doing things that make us laugh, or when we can laugh, we actually we're actually better able to handle life and the troubles of life, and we can laugh at life. And I thought it was interesting, Dawn Curtis, your publicist, who wrote me about you, but she said, he's a funny guy. He's really a funny guy. And I thought, a lot of people don't realize that people who are funny, or who enjoy a sense of humor, or are generally do funny things, they can actually, underneath all that, can be depressed.
Yep. That's very true. Quite a few of the comedians that have passed away in the recent years were quite depressed underneath, and nobody really knew it until they were gone.
Right. Yeah. Well, Robin Williams, right?
Robin Williams being one of those.
Yeah. Classic example of a guy you would go, what? That guy's depressed? Are you kidding me? Right. And I think people, will look at a celebrity, and I think we'll look at them and we'll go, well, what do you have to be depressed about? Right? You're making millions upon millions of dollars, right? Maybe even $1 billion in your lifetime. And what do you have to be depressed about? And this is why I tell people, when it comes to depression, I don't care what you do for a living. I don't care where your walk of life is. At some point, and trust me, people, there are people that are listening to the show, watching the show, listening on the podcast, or you know somebody who struggles with depression on some level. Now, it doesn't have to be major depression, right? I mean, I have a couple friends who deal with major depression. They've actually had to have a brain reboot. Sorry, a brain reboot where they actually have gone through electroshock therapy and literally rebooted their brain to help them get through it. And it's a very long, arduous practice. I'm not necessarily talking about that type of depression. I'm talking about the type of depression that can come on, that can come on suddenly without expectation, and it could be as a result of a situation, or simply that it's been lingering with you. You just don't realize that sometimes the reason why you've been forgetful, sometimes, and I'm not saying that's all the cases, but sometimes maybe it's because you feel a little extra tired or sluggish, or you just don't have the energy, whatever. Maybe because there's something else going on with you inside that. When was the decision, Chris, for you that said, I need to see somebody about this?
I had a complete nervous breakdown, essentially, and it got so bad that eventually my dad told me, he said, "Hey, you gotta get help because this isn't getting better." And so it was really the instigation of that breakdown and my dad telling me what I needed to do that made me decide that I needed that help.
So, by the way, we're talking with author Chris Jones. Wrote these two science fiction books, by the way, that have really been part of his therapy in terms of getting over depression. The books are a reversion. It's part of a series, Lost in Time, Reset the Future, and you can get these on Amazon. And they're available. They're also, you can find these Goodreads as well if you're a Goodreads person. The books are science fiction, and they're a fun read, and there's a lot of really cool. I think if you're a science fiction person, I think you're going to enjoy it. I think you're going to find that these books you're going to really truly enjoy them. And Chris, of course, is brought to us today by our sponsor of the day, Inline Business and Brokers. Inline Business Brokers and Advisors represent profitable privately held companies with a gross annual revenue in excess of $1 million. Inline delivers the highest market value in the shortest amount of time with complete confidentiality. That is their trademark, folks, that it's complete confidentiality. You can learn more at inline.com. That's www.enlign.com. Tell Jeff Snell and his folks that you heard them here on A New Direction with Jay Izso. And that's awesome. Thank you. By the way, I should just say, Lisa, Jim, John, Samantha, Kevin, Diane, Britt, Sean Bay, Wright, thanks for joining us here on A New Directions. And you can always find us, by the way, every Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Jay Izso Facebook page and my page. And you can always join us as I interview authors and guests, helping people find a new direction in their life, their business, and their career. And today we're talking with Chris Jones, the author of the Reversion series books. Hi, Christine. And we're talking about depression and how he dealt with depression, how he deals with depression, and hopefully help a number of you out there who struggle with it in overcoming depression. So Chris, when it came to your personal depression, you also talk about that there was a little bipolar thing going on as well. Is that true?
That's correct.
Is that correct?
That's correct.
So, bipolar we think of more as a little bit manic depressive, right? And by the way, it's common, by the way, we see this, by the way, psychologically, it's not an uncommon thing to see a little bit of bipolar, manic depressiveness, accompany one or the other. When they brought up the word bipolar, what was your first thought?
I thought immediately that I was in trouble, because at that time I was thinking depression as a simple thing that I could easily get over, and then they said bipolar, and I'm thinking now I've got a disease. So I mean, it's truly not the same thing. They're both mental disorders within the brain, but at that first stage when I heard that, I wasn't smart enough to know all of that. So
So I don't want to make fun of this, but I think it's there is some humor in it. So when you heard the word bipolar, did that make you depressed? I don't mean to sound that. I mean, did that depress you? Did that depress you even more?
Actually, it did.
Because I mean, right? I mean, you go. I mean, here you are. You're dealing with depression. Then they come out with bipolar. I'm like going, oh my God! You just throw out another diagnosis at me. I would think, you folks, what are you doing to me, man? You're gonna make me even more depressed.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Is that what you did? Is that what you thought? So
that is truly what I thought. Yes.
I mean, you know what? It's so, and Denise, you're right. Labels are painful. I think sometimes what happens when we get these diagnoses, I'm sure doctors know. I'm never going to question a doctor's judgment. I mean, they got to let us know. I mean, they need to let us know. But you just kind of wonder, I mean, is there a better way that you could approach it? But I think we all go, Doc, just tell me the truth. Right? I mean, you wouldn't want him hiding that information, right?
Right.
So, and yet when you hear the information, it's not all that helpful. So, I mean, what did you have to do to get yourself through when you hear that and you hear the word bipolar? What did you have to do to get through that?
Well, in the process of telling me that I was somewhat bipolar, they explained what all that really meant and, what depression is, which I had really not even gotten to a point where I understood all of that before that point. And they explained it to me and explained that it is in my case, it was a chemical imbalance that was causing it, and it could be treated. And that was, once I got to that understanding, I realized I'm in trouble, but at least have some kind of a fix there that may help.
Here's the thing about, I want folks to hear me on this depression issue. If somebody breaks their leg, we have no problem, giving you a painkiller and a cast. If your brain goes on a break, right? Because you can break your brain. All right, folks, your brain is chemicals. Let me explain something. There are 5,000 microscopic chemicals known as neurotransmitters that pass through over 100 billion synaptic clefts, microscopic synaptic clefts in your brain, 100 billion, okay? If one of those 5,000 plus neurotransmitters does not deploy or get sucked back up into the previous dendrite, what happens is your brain can break chemically. For whatever reason, we think that if you have a chemical problem in your brain, that somehow that is so magically different than having a bone break or a torn muscle or and it bothers me to no end, because a brain can break. I mean, folks, if you don't put the right nutrients in your body's going to break down. If the brain does not have the right chemicals that pass through those microscopic synaptic clefts, your brain is going to break down. There is no difference. And I think what makes me, I think it's because people don't understand the brain, first of all. Chris, I mean, right? I mean, I think that's the hardest thing, is that we don't understand it.
I think it's, even with the doctors, they're working with me to try to figure out what meds will work the best for me, but it's always been about what chemicals are they trying to affect and how each of those are deficient within my system. So
yeah, so folks, there are these chemicals in the brain, and serotonin is one of these chemicals. You may have heard of SRIs, right? serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? Basically, when we can leave serotonin in that little microscopic gap, okay, if we can leave that in there, it actually, and we don't allow it to get reuptaked back up into the previous dendrite. If we can let it sit in that little synaptic cleft, that little area that's microscopic, if we could do that for some level of depression, if we can leave that serotonin in there, what happens is that can actually help people feel less depressed. Because for some people, the serotonin, for whatever reason, is either not released or there's not enough of it being released. Okay? Now, I want to tell you, I'm going to be really vulnerable with you from my perspective. I was having, and we're talking with Chris Jones here, and so I'm just going to share with Chris and the rest of you a true story. So I was struggling. I was having all sorts of problems, and they were physically related. And I was getting blood tests, and we couldn't figure out why. I was feeling tired. My energy was reduced. I was working out every day, but there was nothing working, and I was feeling, it was just reversing. And I thought, well, I'm just getting older, right? So I went to the doctor and I got these blood tests, and he said, something doesn't look right to me. And so he said, I want to do a second blood test, and I want to check what's going on with your pituitary gland. And my pituitary gland was overproducing prolactin. Okay. Prolactin is a particular hormone that's released into your body, and if it's released at high levels in men, it completely reduces their testosterone down to nothing. It's a problem, and it could cause depression in guys and that type of thing. And so what had happened was I was producing prolactin. I actually had to go, they set me up a brain scan. I had to go get brain scanned. And because they thought I had a tumor on my pituitary gland that was pushing out all of this prolactin into my system. And thankfully, they did the brain scan, and that was not the case. It's just that I was over, for whatever reason, my body was producing this at extraordinary high levels. And they had to find a way to reverse it. And so I had to go on to a testosterone therapy in order to help do that and to help reverse it. And it's been amazing for me because it's changed my life. It's changed the way I view life. It's changed the way I'm able to overcome it, because there's a chemical being released in my brain that's affecting the rest of my body. Okay. When we have depression, folks, when people are suffering from depression, whatever level of depression it is, you have to understand that this is a chemical system, and it's a chemical system failure. And for whatever reason, some of you are out there questioning, well, I don't think it has anything to do with anything else. I think people can just get over it. Folks, the chemicals are real, okay? These 5,000 plus neurotransmitters that are going through our brain, they're absolutely real. Which is why, Chris, I'm coming back to you now, which is why we have such a difficulty, as you've gone through, of trying to find the right medication to help keep that all in balance.
Correct. It's one of those things that it still goes back to the understanding of how those chemicals all work. And then once you do understand, and not all of the doctors really truly understand, but once you do understand, finding the right set of medications to actually balance that back out.
Yeah. So, I taught one of my students, Samantha, is on watching us right now, and she's reminded, because I had her in my class, and I was teaching anatomy, brain anatomy and function, and one of the things that I was tried to explain to people about this is that there are so many factors, because if you think about, there's 5,000 chemicals that run through 100 billion spots in your brain. And if you think about that, you try to do a combination of 5,000. All right. It could be one, it could be two, it could be three, it could be the the way it's released. It could be how much of it's released, and it could be any number of these 5,000 neurotransmitters that can have a dramatic adverse effect, right? By the same token, and this was what Chris was talking about before. By the same token, there are things that we can do to get those things to the right type of neurotransmitter, dopamine, right? Endorphins, right? Certain endorphins and dopamine, for instance, serotonin, that we can do that, like laughter produces dopamine. Okay, it does. It produces dopamine, which is a very helpful, happy drug, by the way, that runs through your brain. Sorry, you're on drugs, folks. I know. I mean, Chris, right? They're on drugs. I mean, when you're laughing, you're on drugs. You're on dopamine.
You go to a comedy show to get high, not to have fun.
Yeah, the quote of the day: you go to a comedy show to get high, not to have fun. Chris Jones, ladies and gentlemen, author, by the way. let's get to these two. Let's get to these great books. Reversion, Reset the Future, and Reversion, Lost in Time. These are two of his science fiction books and he's used these stories to help him escape his own depression. And he's used these science fiction stories, Lost in Time and Reset the Future. He's used these to help him distract himself from his own dealing with depression and his own fight with this disorder. And he's been willing to share with us and talk with us his battles and why and how he's dealt with it. And the whole goal here of our show here on A New Direction is to help you help somebody or help yourself understand that, first of all, you may not be able to do this alone. Secondly, it may take someone to say, hey, look, you need to get help. If you listen to Chris, his dad said, look, man, you need to see somebody and you need to do this. And you know what comes with that is listening to that person and actually acting on that piece, which I think is incredibly important. And it's also difficult. And we totally get that. And then it's understanding that this could be a long-term process. Right? Now, Chris, do you think this is going to be a lifetime thing for you, or is this going to be something that maybe at some point you're going to be able to do this without any medication?
At the moment, I don't really have any reason to believe that this is going to have an end, but I mean, I've gone through this for the better part of 40 plus years. And I'm still not all that confident that the doctors know what they're doing yet. So right. That doesn't mean that at some point in my life that they will find that magical cure, or I will do something that actually changes the way I think on that.
Okay, so
I don't know what that is yet.
So your depression right now, as it stands, right? And I know we talk about the bipolar, the dysthymia. Your depression right now, as it stands right now, what symptoms do you have a tendency to experience, even with the medication? What type of symptoms can you experience that says, "Oh man, I'm slipping here"?
I start to lose focus with things that I need to do. Times I just don't really feel like doing anything. At times I spend more time laying in bed and sleeping than I do getting up and interacting with the world. All of those seem to have an impact to tell me that I'm actually suffering more than I should be at the time.
Now, does that now where you're at, when you start feeling those things, does that trigger you to say, you know what, I may need to check back in with my doctor?
Actually, I'm seeing my doctor pretty regular right now because we're sort of in that limbo mode where we haven't exactly gotten medications correct yet. I actually went through a period where I was being treated, and then at some point they stopped treating, and I actually went to work, and for whatever reason I was able to distract myself so well that I didn't really focus on the depression. It was still there, but I didn't really have treatment going on at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then at some point, I actually lost my job, being laid off and all. And after the short period there, eventually things started coming back because I had no way to really distract myself. And so went back to the doctors. Now they're trying to figure out again how to treat me. So I'm sort of in a limbo trying to figure out what is going to work and where we're going. And so I'm seeing a doctor almost on a monthly basis right now.
So when you lost your job, that kind of even put it, that just kind of really reinvigorated, for lack of a better term, reinvigorated the depression that you were already dealing with.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, yeah, and I think people need to hear that too, is that if you're prone to it, then if you have a situation, it's only going to be natural that, you can find yourself going down that cycle. And you did the right thing, right? I mean, you knew that this was pushing you down a bad road. So, did you say, hey, listen, I got to check myself in to the doctor, or how did that go?
Well, I mean, it's pretty much having already been through it once before. I knew I needed to get checked out. Mm-hmm. And eventually I just went ahead to the doc and we started going through new treatments again.
So let me ask you this about your depression. And listen, I'm not here, and I know that you're not saying that your depression is the same as anybody else's depression at all, but does talking about it like we're doing right now, does talking about it help?
I'm not so focused on it right now, so I would say, yeah, it definitely helps. Interacting with individuals is always going to be a way to defocus from the depression and actually give you something to take your mind off of what is really bothering you. Even talking about what is bothering you can help quite a bit, for that matter.
Freud, I'm not a big Sigmund Freud fan, so before anybody gets on this Facebook Live or hits me up on my podcast telling me you're a Freud guy, I'm not a Freud guy, okay? That's not where my background is. But Freud did talk about, and one thing that Freud did give us, which I think is absolutely true, is catharsis is good for us. When we're able to talk, the more we're able to talk about it, the more we're able to talk about whatever issues that we're dealing with, the better it seems that we're able to relieve ourselves of some of that. So I believe that to be firmly true, by the way, that as we're able to talk about what we're going through, what we're dealing with, as the more vulnerable that we get in terms of our own depression and our own, or whatever it is that we're dealing with, I just think that it makes it easy. I think it's easier for us to, I think there's a healthy way for us to express that. And so I think that's important. But what I think is really cool here, Chris, is that in you sharing your story with us, as you are doing today here, and I thank you for doing that, you're helping a lot of people. I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, knowing that, I mean, I know that you're watching the Facebook feed and you're watching people come online, and you're watching them come on, and you're seeing the number of people who've come on and are listening and watching, and some are commenting more than others. I mean, how does that make you feel that these people are listening to you, wanting to hear, because that you're helping them?
It's about the same as when I'm telling jokes and people are laughing at it. It's a high just knowing that people are actually listening to me. Yeah,
it's Denise Matthew says finding common ground and sharing like-mindedness, being vulnerable is so important. And you've got people who are listening, and some, I'm not listening. I don't know where anybody's at. I don't ask them to tell me, but I do know that whether there are people listening and watching right now, whether you're listening to the podcast or you're watching and listening on the Facebook live feed or wherever you're doing that from, the fact of the matter is you could be in a place, or you know somebody who's in a place who has to deal with this. And what was the most helpful thing that somebody, just a normal, I mean, I know your dad was incredibly influential to you in terms of helping you get going to the doctor, but what have been some of the things that other people have done for you that you found extraordinarily helpful as you were dealing with your depression and bipolar?
My therapist that I see fairly often is, just a discussion that I have with her about my daily routines and some of the things that are bothering me. That actually has been very influential in changing some of what I'm able to, how I actually deal with the depression. Knowing that I have family around that I can talk to as well, especially my sister and her kids, that gives me additional ways to release the depression as well. So,
what about friends? Do you have friends that kind of encourage you, or?
I do. A lot of them are from when I was working, and I still stay in contact with them. So I do talk to them as well. Family and friends are the biggest, and you'll find that they will be the ones that you'll lean on the most when you're not doing so well. And at that time, you'll find out sometimes that some of them are also having similar problems, and so they will lean on you at some point too. And believe it or not, that actually helps, because now you've helped somebody else as well.
Yeah. So having people need you or express a need for you is actually helpful for you.
Correct.
First of all, I want to commend you for that, because I think sometimes what happens is I've been depressed, and I've seen people with depression that isolate themselves from everybody around them. And that's not the path that you're taking here, which I think is extraordinarily powerful, that people need to pay attention to, is that sometimes the person who is actually going through depression, sometimes the thing that helps them get out of depression is knowing that they're needed. Right? I mean,
yeah.
Right? I mean, knowing that you're needed is important.
This is going to take it a little bit off of the topic, but one of the things that my therapist had brought up is she will always ask me if I'm suicidal at the time, and I always point out to her, no, that's not the case. I'm never in a position where I feel like that's an option. But the one thing that she pointed out is that a lot of times that the people who are suicidal forget that there are people that they're leaving behind that are going to need them. And the reality is that I know there are people out there that are going to need me, and I can't reasonably give up on them that easy, which is why I'm not suicidal.
Wow. Well, I hope, first of all, that was not off topic. That was beautiful. That was absolutely beautiful, ma'am. I'm just telling you, Chris, that's absolutely beautiful. Yeah.
You appreciate it.
Yeah. Recognizing that there are people that still need you is so powerful, because it keeps you to that. That's beautiful. We're talking with Chris Jones. He is author of these two science fiction books, Reversion, Reset the Future, and Lost in Time. and they're available on Amazon, and you can also get them at your favorite bookstore as well. If they don't have them, you can just ask for them. They can get again. It's called Reversion, is the name of these two books. And Chris is also he's actually used these books, the writing of these books, or these science fiction books, as a way of combating his own depression. And so today we've been talking about depression, and here on A New Direction with Jay Izso. And I got to tell you that I am one who is not afraid to tackle topics that may be uncomfortable to folks. I believe that I believe that I have to be responsible to help people where they're at. And I know that I've got a number of listeners, I've got a number of you, and I've even had to deal with situational depression from time to time myself throughout my life. And I get it. And I know that there are people who do. So Chris said, hey, look, I really want to help people as much as I can with their depression. So he asked to do this as well. And I said, awesome. So, and by the way, Chris is brought to you today by our sponsor, Inline Business and Brokers and Advisors. Are you a business owner? At some point, you're going to need the services of an experienced business broker. Selling your business is a big decision. Make sure you build your deal team, starting with the experts at Inline Business Brokers and Advisors. You can learn more at nline.com. That's www.enlign.com. Tell Jeff Snell and his folks at Inline Business and Brokers that you heard us mention him here at A New Direction with Jay Izso. And again, we're talking with Chris Jones. Thanks, James Nellis and Pam Miller-Nygren, for joining us here on A New Direction. Appreciate that as well. Here on our Facebook live feed, and as well as folks who will be listening later on the podcast. We really appreciate that. So Chris, when it came, did depression have an effect on doing your job, or were the two not connected?
Well, at the beginning, I didn't think it was really affecting my job. In fact, I thought the job was really making it easier for me because I had something to distract myself with. But the problem was that while I was working, the depression was still there in the background. And of course, if you don't deal with one problem, it can tend to lead to other problems.
Sure.
Like in my case, it seems to have started to affect my memory, which is really noticeable when you're a person who had pretty much a photographic memory most of your life. Suddenly you don't remember things so well. And I know people say, well, you're getting older, but this wasn't from getting older. This was something else.
Right.
And I knew it was there. And finding out that the depression was probably the cause for it is one of those things that reminded me that I wasn't getting the treatment I needed.
Yeah, I don't think people understand that connection between memory and depression. When we go through depression, actually our memory is totally affected. And the simplest things, it's the simplest things that we just all of a sudden can't remember to do. I'm not talking about, like forgetting the name of the guy who played Darth Vader in Star Wars. Okay, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that these are tasks that you do, and all of a sudden it's just gone. And depression can interfere with your everyday life. I mean, it can interfere with your children. It can interfere with your spouse or your significant other. And it could be little things that lead to it, and you don't even realize that it is. And then in your case, Chris, you lost your job, probably as a result. I mean, at least it was connected in some way.
Actually, it wasn't because of that. It was a normal layoff round because they were downsizing.
Okay.
But I kind of figured at some point, with the way my memory was going, I probably would lose my job.
Got it. I got it. Okay. But then when you lost your job, that spiraled you down even further.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay. And how long ago was that you lost your job?
Oh, about a year and a half ago, maybe.
Okay. And at that time, if on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I felt like my life could not go any lower when you lost your job, or 10 being my life couldn't be any better, what would you say you were at on that scale of 1 to 10 at that time when you lost your job?
Well, there was two sides of it. One was the fact that, this company is laying people off and downsizing. And I felt threatened on a daily basis because I didn't know when I was going to be gone.
Mm.
So I kind of had a high feeling from that when I did lose my job, because now I wasn't going to have to worry about that anymore.
Right.
So I would say I was probably around a 5 at that point.
Okay. And then right now, year and a half later, scale of 1 to 10, same thing. Where are you at in terms of your own depression?
I'd probably say I'm still about a 5 now.
So it's
maybe a little more, maybe a little higher.
Maybe a 6.
Maybe a 6.
Maybe a 6. Okay, 5.5. Can we go there?
Well, that's probably closer to 6.
Okay, good, good. So if you were at a 5, you were at a 5 because you got a little high of being relieved by the fact that you weren't going to have to worry about it. Did you dip? How low did you dip? After?
Oh, it didn't hit right away. Actually, the first time it actually hit me was when I was driving out to one of my doctor's appointments, and I just happened to drive in the same general direction that I would go to work. That's when it first hit me, and that's when I dipped. So I'd say I dipped to maybe about a 2 or a 3.
Okay. And then have you been on a steady climb, improving since, or has it just been up and down?
It's been up and down.
Yeah. And then that's normal. That's normal. When we're dealing with depression, it's never stationary. It's always up and down. It always is. I think we're fooling ourselves if we believe that, oh yeah, okay, now I'm on my way all the way back up. I know you're going to go up and down. It's just the way it works. So Chris, these books, I read your introductions and of the first book and read your introduction to the second book as well. One of the things that I thought was curious to me is I wondered, as you were writing these books, you said to me in a recent letter that this character, one of the characters in here, was actually your alter ego. And
Correct.
And did that help you?
It was my way of putting out who I am, I guess. I'm not really sure how it helped me, but it's me taking my ego and what I am going through and trying to put a better face on it, if you know what I mean.
Sure. Absolutely. So Chris, we've been on an hour?
Yep, I noticed.
Did you know? And it doesn't feel like an hour. You've been. Does it feel like an hour to you?
No, it definitely didn't feel like an hour. It felt like it went pretty fast.
It did, and I know that you've helped a lot of people talking about your depression and how you've dealt with it and that type of thing. But I always ask every guest before I have them close, if you could help people find a new direction for their depression, what would you say to them to help them most?
Don't forget your family and your friends. They are always there. And remember that no matter how low you think you are, there will be better days ahead.
There it is, folks. Chris Jones wrote these books, Lost in Time, Reset the Future, part of the Reversion series of science fiction books that Chris wrote that has been part of his therapy, overcoming his own depression. And we've been talking about depression today. And folks, let me just say this. If you are someone who has experienced depression, or you know somebody who is, let me just say, be a friend first. Don't judge as well. You don't know what somebody, you just don't know what somebody else is going through. You don't know how powerful your words can be, how powerful a word of encouragement can be, how powerful you can be sometimes just to firmly shake someone's hand, look them in the eye and say, man, you know what? You're awesome. You're important to me. And I appreciate you. You don't know what it means to the lady at checking out your groceries to just give her a smile and say, thank you so much, right? Wish her a happy new year. You don't know just how the simplest things in life can encourage someone, because you don't know what battles they're battling. They could put on the face. They could be an author like this, right? 2 books. Thousands of people read his books. Thousands, tens of thousands of people read his books. Would you know he had depression? You wouldn't think it, right? So you never judge a book by its cover. I don't know. I don't think I could say it any better than that. Never judge a book by its cover. Chris, stay on with me as I close the show. So, folks, be a friend. Do yourself a favor, and also, if you see somebody who is in depression, it's severe, encourage them to get help. It's okay. The brain can break just like a leg or an ankle, or you can sprain it just like an ankle. Your brain can be sprained. Your brain can be broken. Your brain can be hurt in the same way your body can. Don't misjudge that. Don't put that in a separate category. Your brain can break. Your brain can be sprained. Your brain can be injured, right? The chemicals don't always work the way we want them to. So encourage somebody today. So, folks, as I let go of the show this week, I just want to thank you and tell you how grateful I am, all of you who listen across the country and even in the world. We have so many listeners now who are listening in different parts of the world, and I never expected people listening to this program in the world, the people who listen to the podcast. Folks, thank you so much. You folks who listen on iTunes and Spotify and iHeartRadio, and you folks who listen on Stitcher and Google Play and TuneIn Radio. Thank you so much for listening to this show, A New Direction with Jay Izso. Do me a favor, would you please, when you go to your iTunes or you go to your Stitcher or you go to your iHeartRadio, would you give me a positive review? It always helps so much if you will review my show positively, and it encourages others, and it helps us help as many people as we can, because that's what our show is about. Our show is about helping as many people as we can find a new direction in their life, in their business, in their career. And that is the way the show is going to be. And I'm going to tackle tough topics as well. So until then, folks, do me a favor, inspire someone, because when you inspire someone, they can inspire someone else. And when that happens, we can start setting the world on fire and make it viral, where we can start motivating so many other people. Folks, have yourself a great week. I will talk to you next week with another amazing guest. I'll see you next Thursday. Ciao, everybody.
When you lost your confidence and the answers don't make sense, you got to keep your hope alive. You got to know you can survive. This is your time to fly. A new direction, a brand new day. A new direction, things are gonna change. To go a different way, yeah. The time has come. Your dreams will take you places you have never been before. Find your passion, find your strength. Don't worry anymore. A new